Chapter 19. By the time I climbed on the bus, I had already made a pit stop at my truck, and my brain was swimming in the warm, friendly waters of emergency rum. The glass flask was only half empty and nestled safely in the pocket of my army coat. The weight was as comforting as it was tempting, and once I settled in the back of the bus, I kept myself busy looking for moments to nurse the bottle of rum. It was an essential pre-game for my appointment with Beckett Miller, and the rum's happy swirl was effective at canceling the emotional appointments scheduled by the pull. But even after climbing onto the bus to Lake Stevenson Park, I still wasn't sure if I would be keeping my appointment with the Nazi reject with the alleged heart of gold. The fact of the matter was that, despite my posturing and proverbial tough guy oeuvre, Valdes was completely correct. Keeping the appointment and pushing deep into this alt-right rally of goddamn fucking doom was a bad idea on any day of the week, and even worse today after my knuckle-dragging run-in with Malachi. And while my unique style of hoodoo voodoo, as Valdes so eloquently described it, had me back at about 60 or 70%, even my particular flavor of rum-drowned Play-Doh brains knew the odds of getting through tonight's job without severe trauma was low. Yeah, Valdes was 100% correct. Fuck you very much. And yet, there I sat, at the back of the bus, not currently hijacked by Nazis, but still on a collision course with a whole lot of pain, both physical and emotional. The news of the afternoon's bus attack must have spread quickly, because while the bus lines serving the city of St. Charles were still running, there were only a handful of riders, and they were all nervous. Dodgy eyes stole quick, shifty glances in my direction. To be fair, though, I certainly looked the part of a potential bus hijacker. The cuts and bruises on my face probably didn't help either. That warm, happy swirl was starting to cool off, and those probing tendrils of emotions from the other passengers began to creep across my skin like cold fingers making their way to my chest. There was a young woman in a faded red and gold shirt with an embroidered burger logo. She was exhausted and edgy. She had 2 young kids at home, alone, because the delinquent sperm donor had disappeared again. Or maybe he was stocking up and prepping for the rally. Either way, after she heard about the bus attack, she decided that leaving her kids home alone while she worked the late shift was a slightly better idea than dragging them to the dive burger joint where they would fall asleep in a cold, plastic booth after a hearty dinner of French fries. 2 days ago, she had a working car. 1 day ago, white smoke started pouring from the exhaust before she could get out of the driveway. Now she prayed the night would be uneventful and she'd get home safely. My chest tightened as the girl's carousel of anxiety shifted from the burger joint getting wrecked during a riot to bills, endless bills, and now the fucking car. And would she ever be able to afford those steam-in-the-bag vegetables meant to offset the French fries? Or maybe it wouldn't be so terrible if she never even made it home tonight. I had to force my attention away from her before the pull sharpened any more. I snuck a sip of the rum, swallowing hard and resisting the cough that strained my throat. There was an old woman sitting in the middle of the bus, almost lost under countless layered coats. Homeless, forgotten by most, and for those family members who still remembered, they simply ignored her. And this was apparently just fine by the old woman, since they were liberal fucking skunks fixing to destroy the world with their socialist agenda. Better to be forgotten than suffer fools who can't even pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, whatever the hell that meant. Another long drink. I backhanded my mouth and tried desperately to focus on the sensation of rough stubble scraping against moderately less rough skin. There was a father who was barely containing a nervous panic. He was riding with his toddler-aged girl, who seemed excited to be experiencing the exotic thrill ride that was public transportation. The man was trying to take his kid to the movies, but he couldn't help but think the unthinkable. He spiraled helplessly in a whirlpool of doom as he imagined all the life events his daughter would never get to experience if the worst were to happen to this bus. Sweet 16. First kiss. Boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, he wouldn't judge, but instead accept her for the perfect human that she was. College, graduation, marriage. Motherfucker. I tore my eyes away from the man and studied my lap, fingering the flask of rum in my pocket. Seriously, what the fuck was I doing here? Even if I was at 100%, this job was the closest thing to a suicide mission I had ever taken. The whole thing reeked of something rotten. From whatever circle jerk Councilman White was engaged in with this mystery Peter character, to Malachi's involvement, SCBD bending over backwards to pin the lynchings on me. The happy swirl grew less happy as the ebbing warmth begged for another shot from the flask. And why the fuck was I even entertaining the notion of this job? So some pussy-footed Gen Z cuck could have a private word with his ex-girl and hope to fucking hell he stands the slightest chance of getting his dick wet again? Hate to break it to you, Beckett Miller, but no amount of chin-wagging was gonna convince that self-hating chick that the white supremacist asshole she's obsessed with weren't 2 steps away from locking her in a cage and maybe selling her in some kind of sex trade. So what the hell was I even doing here? What else could possibly be wrong with these useless Play-Doh brains? I thought of Josephine. She was safe now at the hospital, but that was only after those fuckheads drove a bus into her library to try to kill her. And if the bus didn't work, Malachi was more than happy to finish the job with his Nazi murder goon squad, adding Josephine to the list of blacks already killed by the Sons of the Golden Future. Yeah, Josephine was safe for now, but what about tomorrow? And then I thought of Murph and his liquor store from this morning. I fucked up whatever plan the Sons of the Golden Future had for him, and Murph was safe. Today. But what about the next person those assholes tried to lynch? What about the next city bus the Sons hijack? And again, big bad brother Malachi. Then there was that sinking feeling from when Mad Malachi all but confirmed how everything that had happened, Murph, Josephine, Samson with that knife, Malachi himself, it had all been designed to draw me out. It was almost nauseating, this feeling like walking into some kind of elaborate trap. And what in the fuck did Beckett Miller's ex-girl have to do with any of it? Or the beatdown and robbery at Dockside? Was that connected too? Play-Doh brains or not, I couldn't see the connections, much less make any sense as to why I was being drawn out. I felt like I was trying to read one of Josephine's more complex recommendations, but the first half of the book had been torn out, lit on fire, and ashes scattered in a goddamn hurricane. It just didn't make any sense, and it left me feeling like the toddler's father who was trapped in an emotional whirlpool. I was on the bus to the rally, but I had no idea what I would do once I got there. Forget trying to read one of Josephine's books. I felt like I was one of those books, but with the back half torn out. The alcohol-muted pull vibrated somewhere in the distance, and I looked over to the father and daughter sitting toward the front of the bus. He had been trying to keep a protective arm around the squirming bundle of energy, but now she was up on her knees, tiny fists gripping the grab bar on the bench, and watching me with large, curious eyes. The kid lifted one of those tiny fists, spread her fingers, and waved at me. She peeled her lips back in an exaggerated, toothy smile. I felt another distant twinge of the pull, and my face contorted painfully in a Pavlovian response to the girl's simple, raw emotion. I was smiling at her. It was dumb, and I hated it. Then I found myself lifting my own hand and waving back. Her face squished into a giggle, shoulders thrusting forward, and those tiny, innocent hands moving to her mouth. The father glanced over his shoulder, and the girl's simple, happy, was quickly eclipsed with abject fear and anxiety and, please just let us get off this bus safely. My smile melted, and my face returned to its resting fuck you state. Josephine's words echoed in my head. Ever since she helped decode the pull and figured out the range of my superpowered empathy, its triggers, and consequences, she repeatedly warned me to be wary of anger and hate. Since I could naturally feel someone else's emotions, nuclear-level emotions like anger and hatred would always be devastating. Succumbing to those emotions, especially when they belong to someone else, could be catastrophic. This father was fearful and anxious. Underneath, I could taste his hatred for me, a person he didn't even know. I looked the part, and that scared him, so he hated me for it. His daughter, though, she didn't even know what it meant to hate someone. She had no fear because she had no reason to be scared. She had no anxieties, no concerns. Because what the fuck does a toddler know about Nazis? With Josephine's warning rattling in my head, I realized that this city bus had been slowly succumbing to the hate, anger, and rage fomented by the sons of the golden future. The line had already been crossed, and the logical part of my brain was convinced that nothing short of a Herculean miracle could pull the city out of that whirlpool of doom. If there was one thing I wanted most in the world, it would be to somehow undo what happened with Gertie, or even have one extra moment with her, unburdened by crippling empathy, to simply apologize for abandoning her. Since that was impossible, the second thing I wanted most was to retreat to the quiet isolation of my lakeside manor with a stack of books, a cooler of booze, and no fucks left to give. Away from people. Away from their goddamn feelings. Sweet fuck, I wanted that more than anything. The little girl judged me with innocent eyes, and something inside me wanted to beg her for forgiveness. If this child who knew nothing of hate could forgive me for walking away, retreating to the safety of my isolation. I told him that instead of apologizing, he should go out there and start doing something about all that wrong he participated in, Josephine had said earlier. And maybe Beckett doesn't stand a chance at getting through to his girlfriend, but maybe the very act of trying is a step in the right direction. The little girl twisted under her father's fearful arm and raised her hand to wave at me again. In my pocket, my fingers drew back from the flask of rum. The pull twisted like a goddamn corkscrew in my chest. Everything is fucking spiraling. I waved back. The little girl giggled. Yeah, I made my decision.